Carrie Lamel, it is 10:01 on December 17th. I am calling to order the commission meeting for the South Carolina Commission on Disabilities and Special Needs, and would call on Commissioner Blackwood to please read the notice of meeting statement.
A meeting notice announcing the date, time, and place of the December 17th, 2020 commission meeting was distributed December 15th, 2020 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Thank you. So the first item that we have today would be the adoption of the agenda. Proposed agenda has been distributed. Does anybody have any changes, modifications to the proposed agenda? Hearing none, would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda as proposed is adopted. Would then call back upon Commissioner Blackwood for the invocation today.
Loving Father, help us remember the birth of Jesus, that we may share in the song of the angels, the gladness of the shepherds, and worship of the wise men. Close the door of hate and open the door of love all over the world. Let kindness come with every gift and good desires with every greeting. Deliver us from evil by blessing which Christ brings, and teach us to be married with clear hearts. And also know that peace on earth can only come when hearts in peace find you. You are still our joy, and you are still our peace, and we celebrate you as the Lord this Christmas and always.
The next item on the agenda is the approval of the November 19th, 2020 meeting minutes. Those were distributed ahead of time. Does anybody have any proposed changes, modifications, or corrections of the minutes as proposed? Hearing none, would entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Or yes, approve the minutes.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Malthus. Do we have a second?
Second, Blackwood.
Thank you. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the minutes from the November 19th, 2020 commission meeting are approved. Next item on the agenda is the Commissioner's update. Does anybody have any updates they wish to give?
I have
Commissioner Malthus?
one quick one, please. I just wanted to let y'all. Well, first I wanted to ask that we possibly consider having a case management update at the next meeting, since we haven't had that in several months. And the only other thing was, I wanted to let y'all know that the policy committee will be bringing forward some things relating to communications that we would like to take care of at the next, well, over time, not at one meeting, but over time, we'll bring a list in January, and over the next few months, we'll be evaluating that, but we'll talk about it more in January.
Okay. Thank you. Any additional Commissioner update?
Just
Commissioner
a comment. I just wanted to use this opportunity to thank the Dvsn network of providers and caregivers, boards, and others who work to care, protect, and help individuals with disabilities living in South Carolina, and just personally thank the work that they're doing, as well as the work of the Dvsn administrative office. I think it's important to recognize those that work really hard, especially those behind the scenes, and I just wanted to say that.
Anything further? The next item on the agenda is public input. We do have one request for public input from Ms. Sandra Loy. We can connect with her.
Please leave your message for Sandra Loy.
Try down there one more time to pick it up.
Please leave your message for Sandra Loy.
Chairman, I have a suggestion, if I could.
Certainly.
Well, I'm up next, I believe, and may I suggest that we go ahead and jump to me, and then after I'm finished, which will be fairly brief, just a couple of minutes, I believe, we can go back to Ms. Lloyd and try again. Could we just do that?
Anybody have any objection?
No.
That sounds great. Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
That sounds like a good idea. Yeah, for those out in the community, obviously for public input, it is contingent upon you being there to pick up the phone. So try to make sure that you're available if you sign up. But we will move on then and then circle back around to her. So would then on the commission committee business section of the agenda would recognize Commissioner Thomas for an update from the legislative committee.
Yeah, we met in, the subcommittee met, the legislative subcommittee met. We had plenty of staff present to make sure we covered this correctly, because this has to do, of course, with the proposal of regulations that will go before the legislature. And we have two driving forces. We have a consent order that we're abiding by in doing the things that we're looking at. And there was recommendation from the House Oversight Committee, I believe it was, that recommended that since we hadn't really reviewed regs in many, many years, that we go back and, this doesn't mean that we have to change them. It just means I believe, and I haven't seen a copy of what they said, so I'm looking forward to seeing that in the next couple of weeks, exactly what they wanted us to do. So don't expect me to come in here with a full review every month of all the regulations that we've got. I think it's just to make sure that the dates are correct, that, you know, small things primarily, because the staff probably would have seen any problem with the regulation, I would suspect, and have tried to get that changed. We did submit regulations that are going to, the guts of which will be put into the actual regs themselves, so they're not prepared for us because they weren't ready for the subcommittee. But you have to put that in the registry, the state registry, to get the ball rolling. So that's what we did, and so next month you all will see the specifics in your emails that come out about what the regs will be. So please look closely at that, because remember the difference between a reg and a policy. A reg carries the force of state law, and it should be within the parameters of the code. So sometimes agencies, and this was a perpetual complaint with the legislators over the 28 years I was there, sometimes step, we think occasionally beyond that. And that's what the courts look at. If somebody challenges it, will be on the basis of a reg that went past the parameters of the code. You can only do, you know, so the code says, and the agency will promulgate regulations in keeping with, and then it gives you the basic stuff, and then the agency's supposed to fill that in. But it can't go beyond the scope of what the code has said. Anyway, I talked about that last month, and I'll probably repeat the same mantra. Do you have anything else you wanted to add to that? So what we will have then is essentially just a presentation next month of the guts of a number of the regulations that will come. So if you all will watch for that and read ahead of time, so that we don't get caught up in too many nuances of explanation. And if you have a question, I would ask that you speak to staff about it, because I'll probably have the same questions. So please pay special attention to the reg proposals. And then sometime, if you want to participate in the subcommittee meeting the previous week, if you have serious questions, please feel free to participate, and we would love to have you. Okay? So that's it, Mr. Chairman, unless somebody has a question.
Any questions? Okay, thank you for that update, Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you, and we're going to go back and take another shot at Ms. Lloyd.
We will. Yes, that's correct. Let's try one more time.
Please leave your message for Sandra.
Well, I'm trying.
Yeah, unfortunately, For Ms. Lowy, if you're out there, we tried. All right, let's move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is under old business. First, we recognize Chris Clark for an update on our V&I switch.
All right, appreciate it, everyone. Some of you all attended our training session yesterday, and I appreciate you being there and being part of that. For those that were not there, we're offering another one tomorrow morning, but even if you can't attend that, we have recorded yesterday's session, and it is currently available on our website. For those of y'all that have not visited our Finance and Audit Resources page, I think that's something that I'm very proud of, and my team, that we've built that, kind of geared towards being a one-stop shop for our finance directors and auditors, so they don't have to figure out 50 different places to locate things they need to do their job effectively. So that video is out there. If anything significant changes tomorrow, if something different comes up that gets discussed, that we feel that video, because we'll record it as well, if that video is actually better, we'll replace the one that's out there with the one from tomorrow. Really want to acknowledge the staff this is a huge undertaking, and it's, I'm glad we got started on it, probably 6 or 8 months ago. A lot of internal meetings, a lot of internal communication, a lot of folks behind the scenes really doing a heavy lift here, but I think it set us up for success. I feel really good about where we are. I feel like I don't anticipate any hiccups. I don't anticipate any problems. I do think transitionally, providers are going to have a lot of culture change that they're going to be going through. I do feel like we'll have to do a lot of technical assistance for providers as they navigate going from, I will essentially say, a prospective payment system to actually being in business like a McDonald's or any other business that they have no revenue if they don't have customers coming in the door. So that is a paradigm shift for a lot of these folks, finance directors and executive directors. I think DDSN's have to take a lead in trying to, get folks thinking like entrepreneurs and establishing different internal controls and procedures to monitor activity levels and so forth. But again, I feel very, very good about where we are. Now it's just getting all the actual pieces moving. We've got a good strategy, I think. I think all the timing that we have laid out can be hit without anything at risk there. We will also be offering a January training that we'll let you know about when we set that up. The reason we're doing that is this is a significant shift for providers, and it's a lot of things to process. And there are a good many things that really don't even become applicable until February, when it comes to how you run certain reports and what you got to turn in to get paid and what the contract language is going to look like, and the new directive, which I'll talk about in a minute, we need to edit. And so, and trying to shove all that in December here before the holidays and everything else that we shared with them yesterday and share tomorrow, just felt like it was best to segregate that and put that in January. So we'll let you know about that. We'll be busy. Still, we've got to rewrite 25-10DD, which will go through I guess we're going to ask the policy committee to refer that to the finance committee. That discusses capitated funding, and there's a good bit changing, as you might imagine, as we leave part of the capitated funding system that's in that directive. We're also in the process of setting up operational reviews for those providers that we've indicated at risk. There are a couple on there that I do believe probably will not accept our assistance because they're some of the larger boards and have maybe the ability to look at that stuff in-house and want to do it in-house first. But I'll talk to Pat and Mary about that and determine, how we want to approach that, because we do want to make sure our providers are healthy financially. We're also looking at contract language. There's going to be some significant changes we're going to have to make to our contracts. So I don't know what input the commission cares to have with that. We are going to be sharing that contract language with the provider network and getting their feedback, but essentially, as we move out of capitated into fee-for-service, the capitated contract has to be revised because it's not capitated anymore. But for this year, since we've had 6 months of capitated and 6 months of not of fee-for-service, the contracts are going to look a little different this year than they will next year, even as we do that, change the language for next fiscal year when it's the entire year and going forward will be fee-for-service. Also, technical assistance will be offered to our providers if they go through this and they feel that they need our help. David Wilson and I have been talking about trying to develop a finance director academy or training program, if you will. We're both convinced that that's desperately needed, and the problem is trying to find time to do that. But that is something we're committed to and we're actively talking about. Also, we'll be working with HHS on the rates actively with residential rates in particular. There are some other nuances related to the rates that are a problem for us, as the waivers have similar services but very different rates within them, and I've shared that with you in the commission training we did.
And quick question.
Yes, sir.
How do we know that through this transition especially, that the different rate issue is not being unfairly taken advantage of?
We bumped the rates up, remember, we talked about it.
You want to address it then? I'm not sure I understand.
I'm not quite understanding the question.
I think what Chris is referring to is, like, for example, we have a service that maybe it's individual employment, maybe a good example, where in the CS waiver, we pay $80 an hour. In the IDRD waiver, we pay $64 an hour. In the HASC waiver, we pay something really low.
$20 an hour.
And what we did was, we bumped them up to the.
Okay.
Is that what, we bumped it up to the maximum rate so that we're paying the rate, the same rate, and that would come out of.
Yes, the best example, so for day program, day units, for example, we pay $31.29 a half day for ID and CS waiver. HASC waiver is $19.64, but that's what we get paid. But we've always paid the providers
More.
27, because we were paying $27.50. We're now bumping it up. Part of y'all's option one is to pass through the full rate. So historically, we've paid $27.50 for all three service lines, even though what we get paid was different. We were losing money on HASC waiver and still are. Every unit we pay out, which is part of our revenue problem that we refer to all the time. And then in regards to support employment, what we've decided, and it's not final, but this is preliminary, we're going to pay ID and CS their exact rates. And it averages out to about $70, which is what we've been paying, if that makes sense. So we had a $70-something an hour rate, but we were getting 65 back for IDRD and 80-something for CS, and it was averaging out. And then on HASC, had spinal cord injured waiver, again, historically, DDSN has always paid that higher rate, even though we were only able to bill about $20 an hour.
The reality is
does that answer the question?
It wasn't the providers who were
Oh,
amalgamating the funds, it was also
It was
DDSN.
It's our fault.
yeah.
Right, yeah.
Right. And so how do you penalize the providers because DDSN hasn't done their job, or HHS hasn't done their job, whomever?
We're gonna pay that, we're gonna
The
pay the
rates
higher
hadn't
rate.
been, the HASC rates hadn't been looked at, so we're paying one rate, but in this world of pass through the rates, we are looking for guidance as to what the expectation is now that we're working towards that admin contract where we have to pass through the rates to the providers. So that could have a negative effect if you're serving HASC consumers in Job Coach, because that Job Coach rate is so much lower, support employment, than it is in the CS or the ID. And we've been paying that higher rate all along. So I just want to make sure it is okay that we continue to do that, or that we have to pass along the exact same rate. And I don't want to really throw cold water on someone having Job Coach just because they happen to be in the HASC waiver, and now we've got a semantics change. So we've got to find out what is allowable. That's what we're doing at this point.
Well, I think the intent of HHS is to get these rates regulated so
Yes.
that they're
It's virtually the
equivalent.
same
And so
service.
to penalize a provider network for our ineptitude or our inability to get the rates set properly, my assessment of Hasky waiver when I got here is that it was forgotten about. Because it's not big dollars. It's small when you consider the other two waivers. So my assessment is, man, nobody cared about Hasky waiver. They just let it atrophy because all the rates have issues. It's not just the two we're talking about. And so we've tried to work with HHS actively to say, look, we got to get this Hasky waiver thing fixed. And we have their attention. I just don't know,
For how long?
And the issue of outliers too, I mean, the folks asking for outliers that perhaps maybe shouldn't qualify, I mean, does that play into this whole thing at all?
So Band B outliers will go away because we'll own all the liability. So that's one of the reasons 2510 needs to be changed, is it talks about at-home outliers and there won't be any anymore. Residential outliers, we're moving that into the acuity process that Mary has presented, where we're going through and looking at the needs of every individual that in the residential programs outside of ICF. And so outliers are totally state funded right now. And Mary's goal is to get that into a Medicaid billable rate so that we actually recoup 70%. We're paying out $7 million in outlier dollars that are 100% state dollars right now, between the outliers. So not all that's residential. I think 2 point something of it's residential.
You say it's all state, in other words, we don't get.
We don't get the match.
We can't bill it.
All right, so it comes out of our budget, we just don't send the bill over to Finance and Senate or Ways and Means and say that we need this extra money.
HHS only agrees to pay things in a rate, and we don't have an outlier rate. We have a rate for residential. So Mary's been working with Baker for a while, trying to get multiple levels of rates for residential so that it factors in these higher cost consumers. Right now, we just get one rate, and we hope it pays for, we pay it out in 5 or 6 rates, but we only get one. And so we hope that it balances out, which it doesn't. We're $20 million upside down because that rate really doesn't balance out.
The rate
So we're
issue
fixing
and the
that.
outlier issue are kind of almost a little bit on the, we can talk about it in 2 separate things. If you're looking at the Band B and I's, the ones that are going fee for service now, I'm sorry, my glasses are fogging up. Those, when you get an outlier for those people, it just means their budget, because of the needs this person has, falls well beyond what we pay the provider. So we pay them one rate, and they might have PCA, day program, respite. So that budget bumps up to $30,000 more than what the band rate is. So they request an outlier. The other way that they could request an outlier is if they've got someone's difficulty of care in a day program that will require one-on-one when the rate was not built on a one-on-one ratio. So if their budget, because of staff time, exceeds what we pay them, then they'd be in that bucket of being able to ask for a outlier. The actual rate that we get from HHS never changes, but we supplement that rate with that outlier dollar with state dollars. So that's the part we don't get paid for. What we need to do is say this person's difficulty of care at the day program, so we have one rate for kind of folks that are okay to take care of, easily to take care of, and they work within the ratios we have, and then we have a difficulty of care rate for that individual who's much harder to serve in that setting. Now, as far as the Band B and I outliers, we no longer need them because the PCA is being direct billed and we're paying it. So now that agency does not have that liability. So they're not going to have to pay that $56,000 budget that's over what we pay them. And so they don't need an outlier any longer. We're the ones taking on that liability. And that's for the community people. Now, residential folks, we pay out different rates. You've heard the bands G, H, R, T. We've got a few of them. But yeah, we're getting close, Dave. We're getting close. But that rate is when you are, we are recognizing their need for that service for that person, and we're paying that rate. But when you go back to bill it, even if I'm paying someone $250 a day, I'm only billing $197 something. So I'm only getting back $197. Now, at a time when all this started, it was fine and dandy because there was more of the people in that lower rate, and it kind of, the high rate people and the lower rate people kind of evened out. But over time, we're serving more difficult people, so there's more of the high needs people, and there's not enough of these low rate people to supplement or to balance the boat anymore. So we're kind of like, we're listing to the heavier side. So that's what's happening now. So our goal is to get at all that state money that we put out there in outliers, is to put them into a rate so that we can match all those funds, because we're leaving too much of it sitting on the floor. We can ask for appropriation for outliers, but why would we turn away from federal money?
Yeah.
You know, it would behoove us to do that. Yeah.
Well, the bottom line is if you get a decent rate where the services are actually being compensated appropriately, guess what? A provider's going to want to provide the services.
That's exactly right.
If you get the numbers where somebody can break even if nothing else, they're going to provide the services.
But you also have to add the expectations to that service. So if I'm going to work with someone who has dual diagnosis, mental health and intellectual disability, and they're harder to work with. You know, I've got somebody who's schizophrenic or bipolar, plus they have IDD. I cannot serve them the same way I would serve somebody who is IDD, is very easy to get along with, will do what you ask them to do, and they're just really friendly and nice. And this person is going to require a different skill set. We need to write the service so that the provider knows what they're going to have to provide. And then when we build the rate, if we're going to say all these people need to have degrees, or all these people need to be certified in mental health issues, you know, with some sort of certification, we need to put that out there and expect it, so that individual actually has a chance of moving on and doing better in their life.
Tell me if I'm conceptualizing just correctly relative to what you're saying to my original question. Partially, or to a large degree, the purpose of what we're trying to do in going to fee for service is to make sure we are aligned correctly with how our income stream works with the providers, so that we're on the same track. If we're not aligned correctly and in the same way, obviously there's something going to be out of kilter. Either the provider's going to be cheated, or the department is going to be put in a precarious position financially, which I think we've seen over the years. So what we're trying to do is accomplish an alignment of how the department's paid, and then that relates to precisely how the providers are then paid. So we don't have a disconnect between the two, thereby producing fairness to the providers and a rational working system for the finances of the department. So as I understand, one of the things we're trying to accomplish is to see that done. That is, the alignment is absolutely critical, and Barry has done, I think, a magnificent job in driving the point home over this past year of the need to do that expeditiously. I simply want to make sure that as we're going through the process, Chris, you're exactly right. I mean, it is a fault and a flaw of the Dvsn system. And I'm not trying to blame anybody, but management, or just the way things happen to be. If they're set up in a certain way, you can't blame entrepreneurs who are out there doing services for taking advantage of perhaps a flawed system. But then as we correct the flaw, I don't think the commission would want there to be, well, okay, it's to their advantage to work off a band system, which is effectively a grant system. That might be the wrong word. But if we're taking hits with increasing the rates at certain areas to make sure they're okay, I want to make sure that as we do this, well, everybody's got some skin in the game, and that it's just not a matter of from a provider perspective, there has to be some tightening of the belt also. I shouldn't say that with donuts on my table, but Anyway, that's kind of where I'm coming from. So Chris, as time rolls on and we see how the numbers are rolling out, I would appreciate it very much. And also maybe internally, I mean, if you could be looking at this too, are the numbers in sync so that everybody's coming out okay? You know, in law, sometimes, and Gary probably could see to this idea, if you're in a mediation in law and you're going through whatever you're going through, if both sides are sort of happy, then you probably got a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
And I don't want one side to come out with the big victory flag saying we won. Nobody wins when you've got to connect with your finances, and the department is financially in jeopardy from time to time with astonishingly low numbers in a banking account for nearly a $1 billion agency. That is not good, and that brings. If I were a provider, I'd be worried about that. You want there to be health on the part of the agency, doing everything just right, and at the same time, it being sufficiently motivational for the providers to do a fee for service, because that's how we get paid. So I would like for everybody, when the thing is over and perhaps the full transition is in effect and we're looking at the final numbers of how it's cascaded out, my hope would be, my prayer would be, that everybody's sort of, it's worked. And then we come out as an agency, not in the hole fighting for survival in a sense and sucking air because we're in a heap of trouble from year to year. That is totally inconceivable to me that Dvsn has had to operate that way. So I am hoping that this will be the solution to that kind of financial, not that is financial problems. Okay, I'll be quiet. Chairman, I just had the one question, and I'm sorry, but this to me is the the heart of kind of where we are right now. So if you'll keep us informed as to how those numbers are flowing out, and making sure that this is going to help the agency, and at the same time, longer, it's going to help providers also. So
and also what we're really shooting for here, Commissioner Thomas, is that people ultimately get services that they need and they have outcomes that they desire. And that's where we want to be. So, and we can serve more if we are matching all the monies. And then I can go to the state assembly and say, we need more match because we are so efficient with what we've got. I will ask you for more, but until I can sweep all that up, it's hard to say those words. So we want to make sure that what we ask for is what we need and that we have planned for that. And ultimately, again, my goal is always that the individuals we support get services that are giving them the outcomes that they really want to have in their lives. And that's really what we're here for.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I just want to thank you all for the training you had yesterday. I thought it was done very well. I thought you all did a great job of presenting it. And I just wanted one of the comments really hit home with me yesterday, and I kind of wanted to share it with the other commissioners that maybe may not have been online. But Ralph, who is Ralph? Can y'all tell me who Ralph is?
Friend for years.
I need a last name.
That public comment.
Okay. It says, he just says, I always wanted to make sure you guys were kept busy. Some of this is getting so complex all at once that it looks like we need to slow you down. But in the long run, I do think this will simplify things. And I think that really summarizes, how things are going. While it is a little complex, and I'm sure you guys are a little stressed out, I think that says, hey, it's going to be okay. And he understands that we as an agency had to make some tough decisions, and we made those decisions. And I appreciated Ralph acknowledging that and acknowledging that, that we're headed down the right path at this point. And I appreciate you all what you did yesterday. Very good job.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, can I make a few comments in regards to Mr. Thomas? First, the general public that's been pushing us getting out of capitated funding system has a problem with DSN taking money off the top of a rate and not passing through what we collect, which there's a fallacy in that because most of our rates are actually under what we pay out. But as you look back through public comments and folks that have come before this body to speak about this system and why they want it done away with, is there's this mindset that we're taking all this money off the top that should be going to services. So that's a big goal. And so the admin contract that we've been presenting to you is moving us out of that. The other issue I'll comment on, and back to our training needs and technical assistance, fraud risk are going to go through the roof with this.
What kind of?
Fraud risk.
Okay.
So, we're going to be working with internal audit, and we're going to develop some things in finance. If you think about it, if I'm economically incentivized now to bill services, and sometimes compensation structures are tied to those performance measures, if I'm a case manager or early interventionist, for example, what does that do to the risk that billing can be
Manipulated.
fraudulently done? And we have found some of this already in some of our other reviews of different things over the years. So I think enterprise risk management needs to be a topic that we force down people's throats as a provider network so that they understand as executive directors and finance directors their need to have internal controls that are solid. And we need to revise our agreed upon procedures engagement that we have in our audit directive that addresses these increased risks that we're about to embark upon starting in 3 weeks.
Well, most of the other states do this fee for service. Do they have a very sophisticated auditing system where they're going in on an actual per person basis at random and in a sense checking out what's done? How do they?
Or helping with the enterprise risk management part.
I can't-
Talking about.
I can't speak to what other states do. I just know my personal experience as an auditor, and I know articles I've read that come out about providers being turned in for fraud. I mean, we're in the middle of a case right now. I think that where billing was falsified. That's a big one. It's out in the newspapers.
Oh, this is ABA, the ABA therapist?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which was it?
It's a provider of ABA therapy for children, autism. That's an older case.
Yeah,
It's
but it's
been around, but it's huge.
Is that this state and this?
Yeah.
It's
mhm,
us.
yes, sir, it is.
But we weren't,
Yeah.
it's not us, but it was one of our providers,
Yeah.
right?
No, she's directly enrolled with HHS. So, because they have ABA therapy at this point.
So,
Would y'all mind sending us that article? I'd like to.
to specifically, address your last comment, Chris, about, the fraud activity. So would one example be with, how have you addressed that with the case management change? Because I know when we switched to fee for service, the required number of times that someone was supposed to see the family or the individual, could have resulted in people making up the visits, and I know of some specific examples that did happen.
I do too. Yeah,
And
and
so-
so does Kevin.
And so, is that kind of what you're speaking to when you
Yes.
say, yeah?
Yeah, it's leveraging technology, it's looking at analytics, it's doing surveys, it's doing home visits, it's doing oversight of billing activity, like, for example, just common sense stuff. So, for example, I was a finance director at an agency years ago, and we had fraud in our rehab supports program, and what happened is I just simply looked, I mean, this is simple, right? How did you bill 6 units when you were off? I mean, it's just
So-
looking at stuff logically and not sticking your head in the sand and realizing that people, especially when there's an economic incentive or an incentive that you're going to lose your job if you're not billing enough, just realize that if you look at the fraud triangle, one is related to, what is it? Not justification, but
Rationalization.
rationalization. There you go. And there's an economic incentive is another one, and so there's these opportunities, another one, very good.
Jeopardy.
I deal with those all the time.
Good supervision
you know-
squashes a lot of that stuff too. So how do you build your
So
program?
are we going to work in, like, I know with this specific example of the case management situation that I became aware of with the fraudulent billing. If the parent hadn't asked to see the notes of what was being submitted by the case manager, then they would have probably never known that that was happening. So is there any way to build in providing notes to families specifically for the case management, or someone, caregiver, someone that can review, yes, I had a visit on this date, no, I didn't have,
Yeah.
I wasn't mailed this packet that they referenced in the letter of information. And Mary, we might have spoken about that a while back when I was made aware of that situation in Greenville. But what are we doing with that? Like, can we build in some things? I mean, I know we're kind of mixing case management fee for service with what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, the
But
same
I'm just trying to
concept,
learn, use from an experience that I'm aware of and that I,
Bad people are going to be doing bad things, whether or not it's fee for service or not. Because to be perfectly honest, I was a case manager in '93, walked into an agency, and pretty much 4 out of the 5 case managers were just making case notes up. They weren't going anywhere. They were just joyriding all day. And found out afterwards when I was talking to a family.
Right.
And they're like, I need services. I'm like, well, my God, I got a book on you like this. It's so thick. You already get services. Oh, no, ma'am. So fee for service or not, it happens. But we talked about, we believe that back in the old days, you had to do 2 file reviews per case management supervisor per month, right? That's how it was. That requirement is no longer there. Family surveys and asking families, do you want to see your case notes, would be the way I would go with that. And we're talking about family surveys now on the local level, making it a requirement for supervisors to pick up the phone and call a few families and ask about their visits. And then on our level, as part of the overall quality review, to go back in and do family surveys, just to pick up the phone and start talking to some families and making sure, and making it known that's how we do it.
I wish there was a way that when the case manager submits the information to DSN to be reimbursed, that the family could also be copied on that information. That's the report, that submission. Because it would be really, not every family will look through it, but it just seems to me an easy way to put in some checks and balances with the case manager submitting this to DVSN to be paid and billing with the file notes that they have to submit. Why wouldn't the family automatically get a copy of that same report? I don't know if it's a monthly or quarterly or annually, or I don't know. I know we're not here to talk about how.
We can visit it. I don't know how easy it would be, but I think something can be done with it.
Because we're talking about enterprise risk management and.
All you're talking about, Robin, is verifying that they actually did the services, which is exactly what you need to do. But the greatest thing I would rather talk about fraud, because at least they have accountability with fraud. At least we can put somebody in jail for fraud, whereas with the way the system is now, they just get the money they can get the money without doing much. So at least now they have to commit fraud in order to steal. That's the way I look at that.
Commissioner Miller, thanks for it.
Yes, roughly how many case managers do we have in the state?
Lord, I don't even know how
Oh,
many.
God.
I can't give you that
If
number
Ben
off the top of
Warren
my
were
head.
here.
Yeah. I can
have
get
no
it for
idea.
you, but I can't give it to you
You
off the
talking
top of
about
my
case
head.
managers or case management entities? Because those are big differences.
Case managers, the reason why I'm asking that question,
Thousands.
I used to be with,
No?
I used to be with Time Warner Cable,
Probably 100 maybe.
Uh-huh.
Really?
and we had laptops wherein when a case manager go out to a site visit, it had a tracking system,
Right,
and we had to log in.
yes.
So maybe we need to get with our technology department. And, because Time Warner's been doing this for years, and I'm thinking that system is available to us.
Yeah, that's
It's
why,
something to, look into.
that's why I mentioned technology to start with. I mean, you're talking about GPS-enabled vehicles, you're talking about
Correct.
Follow Me apps on your cell phone, if it's a
Yes.
cell phone provided by an agency. There's
Whatever,
all kinds of things that you
Yes.
can do related to technology for sure.
that'll cure that.
Well, a lot of cities have to do that with like their water meter people.
Mm-hmm.
They go in and estimate the water meters instead of actually checking them. And so now they have a system where they can see where they drive to.
Great,
They can actually go to those places, they can.
yeah.
go.
The final comment, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners issues a report called Report to Nations periodically, and they just issued one recently, which is a national report on fraud. And if you look at that report, the vast majority of fraud is detected through whistleblower activity. So I think as a state agency, we have to really drive home whistleblower protections, whistleblower access, and possibly whistleblower systems at the state level, so that we open up, a family may say, who do I tell?
Yeah,
Right?
totally, they would.
So I call the owner of the company, the owner of the company's the one that stands to lose. So we gotta look at that too as whistleblower opportunities.
I know we sort of beat this in the ground, but I do want to say one thing, because that's what we talk about when we do our Medicaid fraud training. As an agency, we do a pretty good job training the network about Medicaid fraud. Our training of service recipients is extremely lacking. And that's the people that really need to hear.
That's my BNI. Oh, the only other thing on BNI, we have to get this loan advance program going, and we're gonna bring through you guys, the parameters that we suggest, regarding eligibility, determination of the amount and repayment, and potentially, as we mentioned in the last meeting, whether we're gonna collateralize the loan or not. Some of these providers do have assets that we can attach a lien to, so I think depending on the size, that might be something we need to do.
And, it's not just case management entities, it's PCA providers, respite providers, people who change timesheets, people who go over their authorizations, that's some of the issue too.
Chris, when do you think you'll have the loan parameters?
Probably next month.
Good.
We have to have it next month.
Yeah, well, that's
Chris, you mentioned on the training yesterday, you have, as a state agency, guidelines to adhere by when you loan money, right? And is that what you're kind of, when you say, is that different topic?
That is different. So state law does not allow us to loan our state appropriations. That is strictly prohibited. The only thing we can loan is our generated revenues, which happens to be our Medicaid funds. So there's a lot of internal accounting that has to be done to ensure that we don't cross that line and do something that lands me in jail. And so there's that internally.
They're gonna visit.
And then externally, what's the loan agreement gonna look like?
Yeah.
Do they have to make monthly payments? Is there gonna be interest, which we've already said it, no, you propose no interest, so that type of stuff.
It could be quarterly payments, could be a lot of things.
Sorry, I do have one other question that I made from listening to the training that I was just going to ask. You mentioned 9 boards that are kind of critical situation. Can you provide us the names of those boards? Because I don't know that I've seen them anywhere, and I just wanted to have them.
Sure, if you, yeah, that's right, the chart you have just has provider numbers. Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Actual 9 boards that you're most concerned about.
I think if we're consistent with those numbers, we're always using the same numbers.
You are. We can
I
give
think
you-
we got that
give
in
you
the
a-
email
Yeah.
last month, what the numbers
Okay, of course.
are. I mean, you could,
Kind of like to check
you
the
could,
key cross.
yeah, you could use that as a key, but it's probably easier.
Yeah, we'll send that out to all of you.
Yeah, we've got the key to the numbers.
Okay,
Just in case in future, because we'll use them for everything.
okay, yeah.
Any other questions regarding the BNI situation at this time? All right, seeing none, let's move on to the next item, which is still sticking with Chris, the cost reports update.
Very brief. Really nothing has changed other than to state that we are still plugging away at 13 through 15. We've got a team that's very involved and actively working now on a weekly basis in regards to working on those cost reports versus it can kind of be sitting around waiting for someone to find time to work on it. So I'm proud of that. And then we're also at the same exact time working on 2018 internally. Again, we've got a long way still to go with provider cost reports. We did an initial training that was not extremely well attended, and I think some of that had to do with it was really bad timing. A lot of folks were in the middle of doing their audits, and there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity and notice for that meeting. So we need to do that again, and actually every year. But we have a long way to go on provider cost report quality still, a long way to go. And that's no hit on the providers or their preparers. Honestly, the Medicaid cost report regulations are very unique, and there's been no training offered by DDSN or HHS or anyone else as to those issues. So got to increase our training. But that was my only update on that, unless you have other questions.
Any other questions regarding the cost reports? And this may be super preliminary, but what with the change at the top over there at HHS, do we think it's going to impact that ongoing process, or do we have any idea?
Yeah, I do. That's part of my
Okay,
presentation.
okay, then I will defer it to the executive director.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, thank you for that update, Chris.
Yes, sir.
Next, we are moving on to the internal audit monthly report. Kevin, your sport code is much more conservative than we don't go with the English sport code.
I didn't know I was gonna be here today, so I had to flash last month.
Hey, Kevin, you want to move up here with the speaker?
That was one of my questions.
Yeah, you're fine.
All right, so good morning.
Morning.
So today, what I want to talk about is sort of tagging on to what Chris said in terms of the B&I conversion, because y'all, as a commission, when we met, I told you internal audit will monitor that process as we move along. So we have attended any meetings to which we have been notified. We have had representation there. The first time that internal audit saw the plan was in last week's Audit and Finance Committee meeting. I know a couple of you mentioned that y'all got it 30 minutes ahead. I saw it in the meeting. That being said, I think phase 1 and phase 2 are reasonable. Phase 1 is really just about switching your bands internally to make them accurate. I'm an auditor. I'm all about accurate record keeping. That's really all that is. Phase 2 is when we get into, okay, we're asking for more money for the individuals that we think we need more money for. I do have a little bit of concern with some of the statements that were made during that. Initially, it was mentioned that only 3 people, 3 staff in this entire building were capable of doing those reviews. When pushed, that number increased to 5. I don't.
Would have to pull them off of other jobs.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Just like we've had to do with other special projects when we addressed the level 2 case management, we had to ask for volunteers and get people off other jobs.
Right.
So, you know, with that said, pretty much you're saying with this, with moving this, here's an individual, here are the needs, I'm asking for increased money. Case managers, every day, here's an individual, here are the needs, I'm assessing the needs, I'm planning, I'm authorizing the services. Pretty much the same thing. We have a building full of people who have experience as case managers long before they ever came to DDSN. So they have the abilities. We have a waiver administration division. Again, they do have duties, but what their responsibility is to plan and review, to look at the plans as they come in. Is the assessment correct or the numbers correct? Again, another large group that could look at that, look at those increases.
And Kevin, just to make sure I'm clear on that. So the more people we have looking at this stuff means the quicker it can be completed, it can be, the work can be done. I equate people working, boots on the
Right.
ground to accomplishing the review of the task or whatever they have to do, which in this case, like you said, is, are they in the right band? And correct me if I'm wrong in terms of reviewing. Are their plans correct? Are they getting the services that they need? And, those are some of the things, right, that are done in the evaluation. I just want to make sure that I
Right, so,
understand that the process, because it's kind of vague when we hear it talked about, but like in actual reality, what is it gonna,
Right, so for phase two, we're talking about where the providers are, and I do agree, we have no clue what numbers we're gonna have. If you put a gun to my head, I would say they're gonna be fairly significant. But, so with phase two, you're talking about, here's an individual, he or she has,
this search and search provider,
right?
right? That,
Right. He or she has these needs.
yeah.
And then in this is, so what are you doing to address those needs? A lot of times with increases, a lot of times it's behavioral challenges.
Right.
What are you doing to address that? And again, if that plan says we haven't really addressed it, well then you need to go back to the drawing board. You haven't justified why you need more money. You need to go back to the drawing board.
And but doesn't that what a typical case manager does?
Oh,
Is
absolutely.
be doing day in and day out, regardless of this Band B and I shift and everything that we're doing.
Right.
Isn't that their job to be?
That is their,
looking at these, asking for more money, so that doesn't really happen?
I hate to say that, I don't want to disagree with somebody in public, but I will say that case managers do not have that depth of skill to do that.
Okay.
As far as,
They do some of it.
if someone has a good residential background, has actually done direct care, I would say they might. But I do not think that, looking at assessment for respite and PCA is not the same.
Gotcha, okay, so, continue, I just am just trying to get through the
right.
minutia of what needs to happen.
Right, and I do think that has been happening, because I think Mary said she has a box full where they asked for increases, but in the past, we hadn't had the money to do it.
Yeah, no one's looked at them, they're sitting there.
Right, because we lacked the funding. So I do think possibly some of that was going on. So it's, here's the need, what are you doing? You haven't done anything, go back to square one. Here's the need, here's what you're doing, you have taken steps. And it's costing you money, you're seeing improvement, it's costing you money, we want to be fair, we need to give you that increase.
And then that person's checked off the list and it's down to the next person and the next and the next. And this is gonna be like thousands of people, right?
Again,
I think so.
again.
I don't.
Right.
And also on top of that, the requests that are sitting in the box are not done by case managers.
Yeah.
They are done by the residential provider or the day program provider, because it could be a Band B request. So right now, we're culling all the Band B requests out because we're not needing those anymore. Remember, we talked about that in the first part of this meeting. We don't need to look at Band Bs and Is. So I'm culling those out, and I'm looking at the packages. They go back quite a few years, so you don't need new information. Christy's helping me go ahead and do logistics as finding who's still in the system, who's moved to a different provider, because that could happen too. She's going to do that with me, but those packages are not originally sent in by case managers. No, ma'am, they don't do that kind of.
Right, so they don't come in, they come in from I believe they come in from the executive director, I'm assuming.
Well, up through the residential ranks to the executive director sign them.
The provider at least.
They come from the provider
Right.
of residential services.
But essentially, those folks do the same thing. That being said, we have all kind of people that have been Qs in their past experience before they came to the system that could be included in there. So yes, I was raised with my mom saying many hands make light work. So I would think you could get through them quicker. I also think the larger number of reviewers you have more independence. When you consolidate it with a handful of people, I think there's going to be questions about bias. And what I would suggest would be a double-blind process, where a package goes to a reviewer, they review it, they send it back to a facilitator. That package then goes to a second reviewer without the assessment. Second reviewer, they look at it and they send in. And when you match those up, if the plan is done properly and they've submitted a proper documentation, you ought to get uniformity there. You have two different things, then you have some process. It goes to a panel. How are you going to determine those? But again, if it's a well-documented plan and it ticks off all the boxes, you really shouldn't be having that variety come. So,
Any other observations from your standpoint on this, the big meeting that you should be, looking at or?
I think that gets us through phase 2. It was touched on about funding, and that gets into a whole, that's just, we need to get through this step before we move on to that step.
We can't do the next step without the help of HHS and
Right.
increasing the band rates.
Right.
Because that requires the dollar amount to either, there's two ways to do it. The first way is we need to give them a holistic view of each level of service, and then they fund each level of service. That's going to require a waiver amendment. We can't just say, because that's a different methodology of paying than they have currently. So when you change methodology, you have to do a plan amendment, okay, a waiver amendment. We're this close to actually having to renew our waivers anyway. So if we could hold on by asking them to increase that one rate we get, that's the ask. Increase the one rate that we have. And again, that's in my report, but since we're here, increase that one rate that we have based on our cost reports that have been completed to show that there's cost in the system and that we do need an increase in that rate. If they can bump that up a few bucks and lower that $20 million deficit that we have, then we can do this.
So Kevin,
Yes, sir.
as the auditor, are you comfortable in the direction we're going in?
I think phase 1 and phase 2 are a good way to move forward. I do have some questions that I raised about phase 2 in terms of the number of reviewers. I do think, to Mary's point, so yes, then you throw on, we have COVID, we have HHS is telecommuting, CMS is telecommuting. I was talking to an enrolled agent yesterday said the IRS is 12 million documents behind for people who filed last year. Because again, those folks are telecommuting. When they're telecommuting, they really don't have access to the information they need when they're home. So the process is going to be even slower with CMS. And then you add on top of that, we've just had a change. We just had the resignation announcement of our local Medicaid director for the Medicaid agency here. So that is an interim process. There will be somebody interim. They'll have to name somebody, re-educating them. We still have a middle management staff that we've been working with that know the process, but I do have some reservations without somebody sitting at the head of that agency that moves forward.
At the end of the day, as the auditor, do we get to the bridge comfortably in your mind?
Yes, phase 1 and phase 2, I think are the way to go. I do think we're going to have, not on our part, I do think we're going to have some difficult time with funding. I mean, I think we'll be ready to move forward if we get through this and we'll have everything laid out. But the next step for the hurdles that I just mentioned, they're going to be.
It's an absolute unknown
Right.
because you got an interim going in, who knows how long that takes, and you have to have choose somebody, confirmation, all that kind of stuff. It could be, is it unheard of to say 6 months to a year?
Right.
How long did it take last time?
Right, and typically.
Yeah, that is the unknown part.
Right.
That's a big deal.
And
So what are you not saying?
What am I not saying?
What does that mean?
Well,
What are you not saying? What does that mean?
I think
I
we're
have
saying.
never been accused of not saying something.
I think we're saying it, because I do think when an interim is named, an interim is pretty much told when they go in as an interim, don't let this boat sink. They're not told, oh, move forward with everything you got in the pipeline, and they're just saying, keep the ship straight, don't let us take on water. So I don't know that an interim is going to be like, this brings up a whole new, I think we were very close to having a administrative contract. I think
I think we get that done.
Can we?
Yeah, I think so.
Good.
Yeah. We're that close.
Okay,
That helps us to,
Right.
we pass them through those rates, because if, if we don't, then we're stepping out on a limb. However, what am I not saying? I'm not saying that, I can't take the waiver administration people and put into this fight, because they're busy doing plan changes every single day and their production's up, and we have not hired additional people to do that. So their rate of, how long does it take me to get a plan review turned around and back out to the case managers? I won't leave it where it is. Then we have other people that might have been a queue a long time ago, but are now doing a job that they're the sole person that is doing that job. I can't remove them. I'm trying to think of places that I can move people where it's not going to have a huge impact. Can we do that as a team to review these things where there's not, quote, bias? Of course we can. That can be done, because there is enough folks in the group with the expertise that is required. But this does take some expertise, because you don't want to shortchange the provider, because you don't know what question to ask them, because the packets that I've seen are a little light. First off, we're having issues with people not understanding what swap means, so I'm getting their band change requests, but I already can see that they need to send me more information. But if I were to take it at face value, I would say, no, we're moving on. So we need to be able to ask those deeper questions, and that takes a little bit of experience to do so. Kevin might be right. If he can identify more people for me, I'll pull them, and they can do the initial round. But when we get down to the rejected pile, I want to make sure we go through them again and see if we maybe have a new residential coordinator who doesn't quite understand that I need this kind of documentation to back this up. Sending in something that says they had a med change, on the face of it, I would not change a band for that. But on the other side of it, I'd be looking at what the med is, what the frequency of behavior is, asking them for additional data to back that up. So.
And I would imagine you're going to have a lot of, in other words, the request that comes in may be appropriate, but they haven't shown the
Yes,
documentation.
and I think, and the plan itself, that's one of
So
the
it's
problems we have.
Going back to them to say,
Yes,
give
X,
me
Y, and Z.
more information.
Right.
I just,
We also need to.
We don't want to shortchange people, because in the long run, it's going to be a problem anyway.
Well, if,
I just want to,
if we're doing this whole agency fee for service, this isn't gonna matter, the band change isn't gonna matter in the end, correct? I mean, they're all gonna be fee for service.
Right, but I think this is what Mary's point was she's trying to get them lined up in the right slot. So when we go to fee for service, everybody is sort of in the funding level
That they need.
they need to be, right?
On top of that,
The band is mapping over to what we're expected to pay. I mean, there is
Right.
there's a map over there, right?
So when you map over.
If they're low
make
needs,
sure-
they're getting $100, if they're high, their high needs, they get $500, we gotta figure out who, we gotta pay people the right rate. People aren't gonna take on the job unless they're getting paid a fair rate.
Right.
but that's almost more like 3, getting that fair rate. Number 2 is because when you take away the gap in the capitated dollars, people are literally using that to support these people that we've never changed the bands on. So that's really what we're trying to do here, is to make sure that if you've got a $500,000 gap, you've got additional, I don't know, we use the word gap, okay. That additional funding from the band Bs and Is, you're using $500,000 over here in your residential and day program. My question is, why are you doing that? There's, like we said, 2 reasons that it could be. One, it could be you got too many supervisors and too many additional things that you're doing. Or we have not funded you properly for 4 or 5 people that really require an H band. And we just said, we're not doing that. We're not giving outliers. We're not changing bands. We want to look at those people.
At the rate we're going right now, how long will it take us to get through the current applications for changes?
Well, I'm just getting in the swap changes now.
Right.
And I have literally sent back 2 of them because they weren't swaps. They're requests for band changes. So if you're going to send me a G, you're going to send me a request for an H band, then you better send me a G band an H band that can go to a G band. So it's a 1-for-1. So this is no additional funds for anybody. This is just lining people where they need to go.
Right. And in the plan that was presented, the increases, so that's going to be December, and the increases were in January.
Okay,
So theoretically, it would be finished in January.
okay.
So Pat,
How about you, Tim?
based upon what I asked Kevin, what they elaborated on, do you have anything to add to that?
I would say that the one thing that resonates with me is when you assess acuity going up, one of the first things you're going to look at both quantitative factors. Hey, do they have high costs in the house, but they don't have adequate bands to meet it? Or the qualitative factors, such as Mary's talking about, hey, are their behaviors high and they're not well staffed? So it takes a lot of, I think, experience and judgment to balance those two factors to make a determination as to, yes, it is warranted, because when we come back in front of the commission, the burden's on us to say, we looked at this house of 4 people. There's 2 Gs and there's 2 Hs in there. And our analysis was, we looked at how much personnel costs were in the house. And what we found was they averaged 36 hours a day in that house, which is a high amount. That's indicative of, hey, we're not paying them enough. And on top of that, they had these behaviors. So between they're putting a lot of money in the house with personnel costs and they have behaviors to back it up, then these have to raise it. So it's not as simplistic as a case manager looking at behaviors, because you have to look at costs. So it's not super hard, but unless you have an experienced set of eyes.
Right, that makes sense.
So I think when we come back, I mean, I believe you probably need somebody to make the final call. You could probably have other people organize the information to get it on the assembly line so that people with a lot of experience can make that determination. But I think it's a very doable process. I think we have to realize that it's not an endless amount of money. And I do believe it's a fair thing to do to just get, not only are we kind of compensating for whatever gap money that we're loaning them, that we might be able to say it is justified. And secondly, we're lining up all of our residential beds to match that future rate. Because when we get that rate, we're off to the races. And I agree with Kevin on phase 3, the jet fuel for rate increases is state appropriations. They give us state appropriations, we're going to get rate increases. Now, what we're trying to make the more subtle argument that we have so much but we have so many state funds in our system that if we organize ourselves correctly, we can get that state fund pot over here and use it to fuel our future rates. But that is it's compelling to me. I think Director Baker understands it, but it took some time for him to understand it and appreciate our numbers that we have enough cost in the system. But I think going forward, we'll have enough cost in the system to have them consider rates. But I think we were all lined up for both the House and the Senate before COVID hit. They were going to give us a rate increase of legislative appropriations that we should have had a rate increase last July 1st if it weren't for COVID. And so that's causing us a lot of problems. But the answer to the question, I think we are going to get rate increases. I've heard the House, Chairman of the House Ways and Means realize that it's been a while since we've had our rate increases across the board, HHS's. So I think we're going to get them. I think it's just, we got to keep pushing and we're in it for the long game.
So hopefully we have, and that person or persons that are going to be able to deliver the goods.
I can't say I know that person's going to deliver the goods, but I think we will have the evidence to support it. And I think, I go back to leveraging while you people are here with us is we're going to have a legislative committee that if we arm them with information, they can help us be persuasive.
But the thing is, it's timing. I mean, the problem with starting all over with a new person is timing. You've got to educate, you've got to kind of bring them along, and you've got to build that relationship. And that takes time. And so the issue now we're having is that phase 3 is probably going to be a problem because of the timing issue of not having an HHS director that knows I mean, if they get somebody that knows everything we do, then it's different, but I don't know who that's gonna be. So right now, it's a big question mark.
And I did say theoretically, phase 2 would be over in January, but for the same reasons we asked. I think we're gonna get plans that don't have all the documentation that we
Yeah.
need. So we've got to send them back to the provider, they have to gather the documentation, so, I mean, you know,
And
I don't want to pigeonhole
quality
it all.
of plans are also
Right.
all over the map. And we found that, you know, that's why we have the QA review we're doing and wanting to put out a standard plan, because that is another concern, you know, that you've got, the quality issue is there that we have to deal with too. So, and sometimes they don't, and the sad part is most of the times they're just shortchanging them because they don't write it well in their plan. That would be easy to make that decision, but it's not well written in the plan. But there's other places to look for it. I just want to make sure we don't go out there and not give folks what they need to support the people that they're serving. That's the most important thing.
And I appreciate you all working together toward those ends, because I do see that, and I appreciate that. And I wanted you all to know that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Kevin, you would say that your role in all that the leadership team is doing, executive staff doing to make the Band B and I conversion happen is a monitoring.
Right,
Right?
correct.
So in order to do that, you have to be seeing all the materials, or are there certain things that you can define, you know, in terms of what?
Well, like I said, we've been notified of meetings. I do think Chris and I talk. I don't know if we have a technology glitch in our email system, because there were some where it was like, well, here's the invitation, but the email never came through. Then I think there were some where I didn't get invited to. So, but I think moving forward, I'll be invited. Internal audit will make sure, we'll be sure that they're invited. And then, yeah, seeing the documentation would be nice, sort of where we're moving. For example, I saw that plan last week in the Finance Audit Committee. This is the first chance I've had to talk to y'all about what I saw in that plan. And I do, just in closing, you know, I will say, I do think you need to have more than 3 to 5 people doing it. And to say that, I mean, people can be pulled off jobs temporarily. You can pull a couple of people off a job and it's not going to sink the ship. And when you, I think it just doesn't acknowledge the talent and the experience in this building. When you say 3 to 5 people in this building are the only capable of doing that.
One thing for sure, we gotta get it right.
Absolutely.
We gotta get it done, we're moving.
So,
Thank God.
any other questions or comments?
Right is extremely important.
Absolutely.
Well, I live.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Because
Because
if
being
not, it's
affects the human
divided.
being on the other side of it. That's my goal. It affects the person that receives the services, so.
Right.
Providers with incentives so that people get services and more of it. For less money. Keep the services on them out. So if I pass away before the next meeting, remember I said that.
All right, if nobody has anything else for me, I'm just going to close and wish everybody a very happy and a very safe holiday season. And
Thank you.
we'll see y'all the first of the year, 2021.
Thank you very much.
Let's stand by me, please.
Pardon me?
I'll give you my address. Tell Stan to come.
On his list, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Doesn't it go in ranking from good to high?
All right. Next item on the agenda then is the Covet update from Pat.
Okay, it's in your tab 4.
Thank you.
Give you a second to take a look at it. It has very small page numbers on the bottom right, and I'll try to cue up the page numbers as I turn it. Let me go to the second page. This morning, when I woke up on the national news, the national news was, yesterday was the highest number of cases, hospitalizations, and deaths in the country since COVID started. So nationally, it is at its highest peak. Page 2 just gives you a snapshot of the history of positive COVID cases in South Carolina. And I just want to point on the left side, the cases per day. You can see obviously we're at the peak since this pandemic started. And on the right side where it talks deaths per day, if you look at the summer surge, you can see where they paralleled, and now you're looking at the Thanksgiving, Christmas surge, and you can see where, deaths have not gone up to the same, extent. And the experts are telling me that that's an indication that the medical community has really honed its treatments to prevent death, which is a positive thing in this pandemic. Page 3, a lot of data there for the data hounds. You can look at it later. What I want to bring your attention to are the 2 arrows on the right side. And those columns down there basically show the number of cases per month for both community residents and community staff. And I'm bringing your attention to December 15th. We're halfway through the month, and we have 50 community residents who have been tested positive. So if you do the math, that'll be 100 this month, and that'll be the second highest month since the beginning of the pandemic, with obviously the August summer surge being the highest. But if you look down, this is what startled me. When you look down on the pink, where you see 187, in the first 15 days of December, we've had 187 staff be COVID positive. So the first 15 days almost equals our high month of August. And I think that's indicative of what happens into the community gets inside our facilities. And so the surge is affecting us. If you go to the next page.
Pat, are we closing down the facilities, or we following VHEC, or what is the policy at this point now that these numbers are climbing again inside our facilities?
Closing down facilities, which.
Are we still letting people come in, or have we stopped them from coming into these facilities?
Visitation.
Admissions or
Visitation.
Visitations is the big one.
We're still allowing visitation.
Yeah. As far as admissions go, we have really choked that down. And quite frankly, we don't have a lot of people wanting to come into the
Right.
congregate care facilities during COVID.
And there's a lot of, there's strict guidelines for the visitation.
And if you look at the next page, page 3, it's the same data sheet, but it's for the regional centers. And you see the same thing. For the first 15 days, we have 25 positive COVIDs. And if you double that for the month, we could have a record month or near a record month in December. So it is getting inside the walls of our facilities. The main reason I want to talk about today, I think that's important, is talk about the vaccination plan that is coming fast and furious to South Carolina and across the country. So if you go to page 5, South Carolina, DHEC is leading the vaccination program. They've identified 3 phases, and obviously they're doing it in direction from CDC. CDC gives a direction, they execute it. DHEC has described the first part of the first phase, which they call as 1A. 1A is a group that is going to get the first round of vaccinations. And basically it is, you have to be a frontline worker who are the highest risk of contracting COVID-19, and residents and staff in long-term care facilities, which includes Dvsn and our provider network. So we are in the first group. And also, and it's important to note, in the long-term care facilities, it does include janitorial, housekeeping, food services, direct support that protects the front line. It doesn't cover accountants and HR and those type of people. There's 2 vaccines been developed. Obviously, we've seen on the news Pfizer. The trucks rolled out last Sunday morning on national TV. And they're going to go mainly to the hospitals who can accommodate the high, the low freezer temperatures, minus 70 degrees. They're going to get that. The Moderna vaccine has not been approved, but they literally expect it to be approved this week. And once they approve it this week, DHEC has decided that the Moderna vaccine, once approved, will be used for the long-term care facilities. And the reason they're doing that is it's just easier, it's logistically easier to deal with because you can store it in just normal freezing temperatures. Once that gets approved, it'll be a messenger RNA vaccine, as opposed to having live or dead virus components in the vaccine, which other vaccines are doing. 2 doses and stored at regular temperatures.
Which kind are you gonna get?
Me?
You with the hair on your head.
Hey, if you ask, personally, if you asked me 3 months ago, I said, hey, my dad was in the car business. He said, don't get the first car off the assembly line. 3 months ago, that would have been my idea. But I tell you right now, at my age, and I'm younger than you, I am nervous. And I think when they offer it to me, I'm taking it.
Moderna?
First one they give me.
First one you get.
First one
You
I
want,
get.
everyone you tell me.
Yeah, I watch the national news for a while, see what's working.
On top of that, we're asking our staff to do this,
Yeah.
and so I will
That's
be
exactly
first in
right.
line when I'm allowed
I
to.
agree. It's,
But we're shooting for, but is our preference Moderna as from
No.
the agency? Do we have?
we don't have a choice. DHEC has decided Moderna is going to go to long-term care facilities because it's the only two drugs approved right now.
It's decided for us.
Yes,
Right.
they're going to offer to us.
And it's gonna be Moderna.
It's going to be Moderna.
Okay, because of the freezing.
Yes, and it's available and easier to
Are there
just
two shots necessary with Moderna's?
yes.
One's kind of like a booster.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a
Yeah.
booster idea.
The first one is given, they say that gets you up to about 65% immunity, and then the second one's 21 days later, and they say between 90 and 95%.
Well, I read on the internet where.
Oh, we know that's
where
right.
If you know this is true, where I will be able to, the communists will know exactly where I am all the time. If
I heard that too.
I tell you what, the stuff on the internet about this is just, God, it's just incredible. You know,
Well,
just-
social media is really causing a problem amongst our staff as to whether they're going to take this or not, and that's another reason why, as soon as I will see, I'm not in that 1A. I'm not giving direct care, so I don't get to go, but I will be in line as soon as I am allowed to go, because our staff needs to know that I think it's safe. I'm not gonna tell them they need to do this, or they should do this, or they really need to consider this, hard, because they're dealing with vulnerable people, if I don't go get it myself.
The mechanics to make this work is our provider network has to enroll DHEC vaccination program. They've been sent information. We sent it again yesterday. And there's a process of enrolling. And the biggest hurdle that we have seen from our provider network is if you're a smaller provider and you don't have a chief medical officer that will cover everything, they kind of it's kind of a stumbling block. And anybody out there that's listening to us, I encourage you to call Rob McBurney. Rob's in the back. Rob's our guru, who's our foot soldier on this. The communication we sent out yesterday, the executive memo has his number on it. Call him. He'll hook you up with DHEC, and they will find a way to get a chief medical officer if you are so inclined. But the key is, once you enroll, that's the key, because when you enroll, DHEC still may go to nursing homes first, assisted living first, but you're in the system and they will get to you. The key is to enroll successfully. There's no cost to our provider network. Page 7. And now I'm on page 7. And the way they're going to execute this is they have contracts with Walgreens and CVS and possibly others, but they're the two big ones. And once you enroll, starting as soon as December 28th, CVS is going to pick up the phone and call people who are enrolled and say, here are your 3 dates that we're going to come to your facility and we will do the vaccinations. And then that triggers the whole consent form. Everybody who takes a shot has to give consent. Staff has to give consent, and our individuals have to give consent. And our individuals' consent is, obviously, we've talked about it many, many times, is, if they cannot give consent is needed from an authorized decision maker. So right now, at the regional centers, I think we will be probably sooner rather than later. We're in the process of executing these consents so that we have our people ready to go. So when they give us those 3 dates, when they show up, we'll have the consent form, and then they will bring their nurses on site, and they will be the trigger pullers for the shots.
In more ways than one.
The key to this is Moderna hasn't even been approved yet.
That's right.
Therefore, as soon as it's approved, we will get these things called vaccination information sheets, and that'll be kind of the due diligence, the you know, to help you make your decision.
Right.
So it's hard to ask for consent when you haven't even had the information due diligence sheet. But once we get that, we'll disseminate it, people will read it, we'll get consent, 3 dates will be set up, and hopefully it'll be executed in January and February for the more institutionalized settings. Go to page 8. Page 8 is, I'm not even gonna discuss it, I threw it out there for the avid reader.
Pat, before you move
sir.
forward, Chairman, since we represent disabilities and special needs for the state of South Carolina, and I was listening to the state director, boy, it'd be awfully nice if all of the providers saw us being taking the Moderna or whichever one, because we represent those people throughout the state of South Carolina. And that's just a recommendation. I don't want to jump the line, but we represent an agency in the state of South Carolina.
Yeah,
Just a recommendation.
you're not gonna get to jump the line, but, and that's I wish we could, because I think it makes a big point.
All right, yeah, the point being that we make clear that we're not expecting our staff to do something that we're not going to.
Correct.
Right, roger that.
Absolutely. Whether we 6 or 8 months down the road, doesn't matter.
Page 8 is got from DHEC. They've only really defined a component of phase 1. They haven't even gotten into the details about batting order for phase 2 and 3, but it just gives you a high level view of what's to come. One last comment I will make is we checked with DHEC 2 days ago, and of our residential providers, all regional centers are signed up. Of our provider network, we have over 50 residential providers, and we have 11 that are confirmed in process or completed. And Rob's on the phone calling them as of yesterday. And they can sign up. They're not behind the power curve, but the time to do it is now. Any provider out there, please, to get it started so that once you're in the system, DHEC can then get to you. But if you're not in the system, they're not going to get to you, and then you're going to probably fall into some sort of secondary pattern where you're going to have to use individual physicians as the vaccine gets disseminated at a broader level. Any questions? Thank you, Rob.
And my only comment, guys, is looking at this. I know we were real good early on in this. We were doing everything remotely with these meetings. These numbers pick up really badly. I appreciate the fact that deaths are going down, but I don't want to catch this thing, period. I don't care if I die or not. It's up.
Yep.
My good friend who had it said he couldn't walk up a set of stairs without being completely wiped out for the rest of it. So we're going to keep a careful eye on this as a group as well. And when we get to January, if we need to look at it, if the community spread continues to follow this, we may go do remote again. That's just an option for us. I like seeing everybody, but those numbers scare the heck out of me, just personally.
Well, our individuals, I know it is unpleasant, but most of our individuals are either asymptomatic or very low symptoms, like a temp or.
Yeah.
The worst part of it is you have to quarantine everybody, and you have to keep them away from people they are normally being taken care of and all. So that's been the worst part. However, we did lose a staff person yesterday. And one of our lawn maintenance folks from Witten Center, he was an elderly gentleman, and he had trouble. He had been in the hospital since early November. So it does translate, Gary, you're right, to people.
Okay. Any other comments on the COVID project? All right, moving on to new business. First thing on that is the financial update, tab 5.
All right, I'll make this short and sweet. I'll entertain questions if I don't cover it at the level you desire. We are, again, when I look at this thing, I'm really focusing on the far right year-to-date actual expense column and remaining budget column, and then the total, the variances at the bottom as far as how we're doing in comparison to target numbers. At this time, we're 3% under our spending plan that you adopted, and I will note with that our spending plan was down significantly from prior year. As if you recall, we identified some issues in our spending plan that were triggering improper budgeted expenditure numbers. Even with that, we're still 3% below our spending plan as we've refined that number and gotten better at what that number should be. We're about $22.5 million under budget through November. That's after 5 months. When you consider in that number, we still have an extra provider payment that's in there because of the timing issue with July. We're actually almost $40 million below expenditures, which is a 5% variance. As I dig into this and try and determine what's going on, I did pull, and I think we're going to start providing to the commission some additional reporting on this topic. Pulling November 2019's report, our expenses through November of 2019 were $306 million. This year it's almost 290. So, that's a significant drop in expenditures. So we're already analyzing and looking into what's behind that, because on the surface, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
It's a miracle.
It leads me to believe that either last year's was overstated by something, or we're missing something this year. So
we had some really smart commissioners come on in this past year. Maybe as you were going through this, the first month I was here, we were down to $150,000, and now we're $40 million up. And Stephanie and Barry deserve a round of applause.
it's all you. Couldn't be more correct.
Goodness, 40 million.
Keep in mind,
I'm not saying anything.
I knew you were right, quiet.
this number I'm sharing is expenditure based. So, of course, if our revenues are having issues too, that doesn't correlate necessarily to cash in the bank. To that effect, I was going to mention to you that we are starting to really hone in on our cash projection so we can start sharing that with the commission on a monthly basis. If we start sharing that right out the gate, its usefulness and accuracy is really not there. So now that we have 5 months under our belt, really at risk going forward is how do we project the impact of fee for service in our cash projection, which is going to be very tricky. But we are looking at, thus far, a preliminary indicator that our cash is going to be up again for this year. So that was my report. Again, hopefully in January, when we report December, there will be some additional reporting to you all, and I do hope to have an explanation of this $16 million difference between November and November year to date.
Any further questions regarding the financial update?
I'm sorry, I got one more. I wanted to ask this is wonderful, it's true, but are we 10% below what we expected to spend in administrative right now? We're at 37, we're gonna be at 40,
Yeah, 7%.
7% below in administrative fees, administrative costs?
Yes. Now, to that, we have significant vacancies and so forth that we've had during that period, as well as, I will say this again, the accounting at the state level is not what it is at a local provider level. It is very unsophisticated, very. We are cash basis. We don't make accruals. We don't make deferrals. We don't do prepaids. We don't do any of that. We're not allowed to. The state comptroller general says, keep your hands out of our books. We need them kept this way because you're part of the state. If you want to do that kind of stuff, you do it in an Excel spreadsheet and manipulate it that way. Because I've talked to other CFOs with other state agencies and I asked them, it's like, how do you get anything accurate for your agency? Like, we can't. It's all garbage. I said, so how do you do it? He's like, I got a staff that sits there and we download everything in Excel and make all these journal entries in an Excel spreadsheet for me to get useful information. And I just don't have the staff on right now to do that. And I also don't think we have the knowledge
I'm not sure that
how to do that
necessarily
either.
productive, would it?
What's that?
I'm not sure that'd necessarily be productive, would it?
I'm used to having very accurate financial information.
Timely and accurate
Yeah.
information.
And this is not, and again, this has nothing to do with my staff. This is not a reflection. They're doing what they are told to do by the CG's office and the state treasurer's office.
So don't you think this is the best you know, but you really can't say?
We have to manipulate the heck out of this data to give you something that I would put my opinion on as a CPA. If you gave me this to audit, I would laugh at you and say, I'm not even gonna start on this, because I can tell you right now, I give you a disclaimer of opinion without even digging into it. Just on the surface, I can tell. So that's the problem. We've got to really dig in and figure out what's going on. We also have identified that we had a ton of, okay, so I'm sorry, I know time-wise, I'm trying to answer the question fully though.
You're good, Chris.
When I got here, we noticed that a lot of personnel were being charged incorrectly to the wrong department. Lots of staff. So as we dug into that and tried to determine what was going on, basically HR, when someone's hired, they throw them in a cost center they think they belong in, but there was no communication with budget or finance to validate that that cost center was correct. And so we've had to train HR and build communication with them so that when they hire somebody, they're checking with us to make sure they don't just throw them in a cost center. So as we've gone through, we've spent hours and hours and hours combing through personnel records and getting people charged to the correct departments. So some of that has to do with when you're starting to see these variances, you know, in our spending plan, we're using prior year data that's potentially incorrect. And then the current year data reflects after we're making all these changes. So that's part of it as well.
Too many silos. Too many silos. HR was siloed from finance was siloed, yeah.
Nobody was even looking at the budget codes. I mean, we had, you wouldn't believe some of the crazy stuff.
No, yeah, I would. That's the problem. But you're working on it. Okay. Any other questions regarding the financial update? Would then entertain a motion to approve the financial update as presented.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Any on the financial update? Next item on the agenda are the contract amendments over 200,000.
Okay. Tab 6. This is going to take some weird explanation, but so here's the issue. As we're moving from B&I to fee for service. If you look at this, you're sitting there going, wait a minute. So we've got all these new B&I folks, aren't we leaving that going to fee for service? Yes, we are. We start our fiscal year and do a download in May and do all the initial contract amendments, the initial contracts off that download. As people come and go through the system, we true that up with a variety of timed reviews of population changes, if you will, or census changes by provider. These amendments reflect, let's say someone came in and they were approved for a waiver slot September 15th. This amendment's going to reflect funding from September 15th through June 30. Well, we know full well in January, we're not going to be funding that band anymore. It's going away. But because of how we need to flow this through our system and maintain continuity, this reflects a bunch of money and it's actually $2.1 million statewide for new band Bs and Is. The rest of the 2.1 wasn't over 200,000. It was smaller numbers for each provider. Over half of this money is actually going to be taken back in an amendment in a couple weeks when we take the Bs and Is back. So if someone started in September, it's gonna be way more than half of these numbers coming back to us because all of these slots being added were between July 1st and mid-November. So this may be funding for somebody from October 1st through June 30. They only get to keep a little tiny piece of this when we pull back the bands. So these are the 4 boards that had enough change. We have been filling our waiver slots, and Pat can speak to that, I guess, as we try to get these slots moving and getting people funded. So this is just a reflection of that. So we ask that you approve these 4 provider contract adjustments that are over $200,000.
Any questions? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion to approve the amendments as presented. We have a second. Thank you. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, those amendments are approved. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the fiscal year 21 strategic objectives, tab 7.
These are the objectives that the commissioners have asked us to move forward with over the course of the next year. However, there's a few that are multi-year. I think y'all understood that when you kind of wrote them out. The first one, because we're on audio, I'm just going to go ahead and go through them. The first one is the move from the band capitated system to a fee-for-service model to include substantial progress for at-home and residential bands during FY21 and complete conversion by 1/1/22. And the second strategic objective is to obtain full compliance with the home and community-based settings rule as far in advance of the March 2023 deadline as possible, along with accomplishing FY21 milestones set out in its project plan. We did add an asterisk, and you might want it stricken, but we put this in here to remind everybody that state compliance schedule is set forth by the Department of Health and Human Services as the single state Medicaid agency, because ultimately they're the ones that set this time frame. Our job is to get our providers across the finish line. So, I'm just telling you, we put that in there. Same with the next one. Obtain full compliance with the conflict-free case management rule prior to the March 2023 deadline, along with accomplishing FY21 milestones set out in the project plan. Again, state compliance schedule set forth by the Department of Health and Human Services as a single state Medicaid agency. Internal audit will commit to reviewing both DDSN internal processes and the provider network. Internal audit must provide assurance to the commission that DDSN is operating properly and the commission is being provided accurate and full information to make appropriate decisions. Goal number 5, management will ensure that the commission receives accurate and full information on specific issues of interest. For example, fee-for-service conversion, waiver funding, waiver waiting list, and overall agency operational efficiency and effectiveness. Number 6, management will ensure it operates in a highly transparent manner with an affirmative duty to alert the commission to significant issues. For example, new divisions, major staff changes, new programs, along with seeking commission formal support when appropriate. Number 7, address weak financial reserve position by controlling administrative costs, increasing process efficiencies, plug band system revenue holes, and justifying rate increases from the Department of Health and Human Services through market rate data and delayed cost reporting. It's those cost reports that allow us to ask for those rate increases. So we are working on those. Improve the quality management functions for community settings and regional centers through better analysis of performance data to identify problems, follow up problems identified with higher expertise, providing technical assistance, build a systemic training program for providers, enhance technology, enhance performance data through improved standards, better correlating with actual performance, and a risk-based methodology, and ensure accountability for required corrections. This will be a huge part of that work group in January. Number 8, institutionalize a continuous improvement workplace environment through process improvements, improve management information systems to support evidence-based management and accountability for results. And number 10 is address the impact of COVID-19 on the individuals we serve, providers, and Dvsn operations. Those are the, I think 6 of them came directly from the commission, and we added a few more, especially in light of the community, the quality of management functions that we are tasked with as part of waiver operations. And we added the COVID because that is just, it is just overseeing everything we do right now. It's just out there. So we have to see what those impacts are. Any questions?
Questions or comments regarding the proposed strategic objectives for fiscal year 21? Hearing none, will entertain a motion to approve the objectives as presented.
So moved.
Have a second.
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, those objectives are approved as presented. Thank you.
Those will be posted on the website so folks know what they are, so they didn't have to write down the word. Okay.
The electronic visit verification.
Yes, sir. And I'm doing this because I was going to put it in the director's report, but because I had to go so quick last time, I figured I better put this as part of the agenda this time to let you know where we are on this. You know, this is part of the Cures Act, not to be confused with the CARES Act, because they make everything sound so much similar. And it is really to address that fraud issue, you know, to make sure that when people are doing at-home services, that they are not like sitting in front of somebody's house and writing their timesheet out, they're actually providing the service. So it is it is a fraud measure, not to mention ease of getting people paid. So anyway, 2.5 years ago, Interim Director Malley agreed to DHHS being part of the DHHS plan, although technically it didn't matter if we agreed or not, because the truth of the matter is DHHS is a single state agency. CMS is making them choose what electronic verification system the state will use. Okay, we don't get to say, oh, we want this one. We can inform that choice, but we can't make the choice. So HHS had told CMS that they'd be using that as a care call. I always want to say call care, but it's care call via the Phoenix system to do this electronic verification of services. This system has been in place for a long time, so they're already using what they have, but they did want to go out in the marketplace to look for something that is not, that might be new, that might be something that everybody can be part of. So the EVV is electronic visit verification. It's used for personal care services, anything that a person is working with another individual. So it does include respite services, okay? When I became a state director, we were told, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be part of the DHHS system. And we wanted to remind HHS that our individual service providers don't always go through the Phoenix system in the traditional manner. The traditional manner means that the case manager has a plan in Phoenix with an authorization in Phoenix, so that as the provider is calling and their time's flowing through the system, it's ticking down the authorization so that it can't go over what the authorized amount is. Our service providers for the PCA, which is essentially the same service, have to go through something called the web tool. So although they're directly billing HHS, they're not going through Phoenix. That's a wrinkle. So that is one problem. The second problem is respite, because many of our providers of respite, the actual, not provider, the actual employer is the family member. So when it comes down to it, each one of those people have to be enrolled, trained, and have to work the system. They have to be given a number the provider would have to be able to call that number as be part of the EVV system. We have thousands of those people, okay? We told them. So due to contract bidding, appeals, apparently when you do an RFP that's this big, you get a lot of appeals. I didn't realize that with state government. Their new system is not set for delivery until this time next year. Well, January 1st is the deadline to be part of the EVV system. So we have folks that are, they've already got a good faith extension for this year. Now, next year is part, you should be part of the EVV system by next year. We're not going to be there by January 1st. So this past November, Director Baker advised, despite that saying that CMS is probably not going to waive any penalties, they are, however, not going to do global penalties. So just be based on the services rendered. So it's not every PCA hour in the entire state, because not all PCA hours are going through EVV, but it is going to affect us and assess a penalty in 2021, which is 0.25% or a quarter of your FMAP. So we have gotten an FMAP jump of 6.25%. It would take that down to 6% versus 6.25%. The estimated cost is about $1.5 million in lost FMAP money over the course of the year while we're trying to get compliant with the system. We met on December 7th to nail down a logistical and technical problem, because this is a computer issue as much as a technical computer issue, as much as it is getting all our providers in place. We also suggested that we purchase a system and get our providers to go through our electronic verification system. But by the time we paid for it, by the time we got everybody trained and on board, it would be getting close to the $1.25 million we'd be losing as not being part of the original system. And the fact is, we also don't want to add additional provider abrasion where everybody's got to go through different portals to get their time in. So if I'm a PCA provider and I provide PCA through the CLTC waiver, our waiver, another waiver, I've got to have 3 different ways I have to call in. We don't really want to do that. That causes more people to say, well, I'm just not going to serve you folks. I'm going to stick to these people. And we don't want our folks to lose capacity. So as far as that is, and it's also that the fact that this is the federal mandate is the responsibility of the Medicaid agency. Director Baker was not adverse to the suggestion that he's on the hook for this $1.25 million. So right now, what I am working on is an MOU that lists all the discussion that we had on December 7th, and to get that in writing, especially with a new Medicaid director coming on board. So, Memorandum of Understanding. So this year is going to be spent on working to enroll and train our providers on the EVV workaround they have right now to collect our data through one portal, and then a vendor on the other side of it will take that data and separate it into the buckets that it needs to go into. So that the provider, if I'm calling to care, I'm going through this one portal, and I'm not having to find 3 or 4 different things to sign up for and get trained on. And then at the other end of it, the vendor separates out, this is for respite, this is for PCA for our waiver, this is PCA for the CLTC waiver. That's where we are. Any questions?
Seeing none, move on to the next step of the state director's report.
All right. I have to take so much sinus medicine to get through this meeting. All right. We had a lot of topics, and that EVV was going to be part of my director's report, but I'm trying to learn from these meetings. Again, Joshua Baker has resigned his position as director of DHHS. He stated he'd be working through January. He said that, and that being said, we have a lot to get done because we've got a lot on the burner here. The EVV MOU is number one on my hit parade because I want to make sure that we get everything that we had in that process down in writing, and including payment for the FMAP loss. They got to complete the current year's admin contract along with some individual service agreements. We have an overarching master agreement with HHS as to what we do administratively. And that's at a 50-50 match, right? But there are other items that can be used to get a higher match. So if we're doing any quality improvement type of activities, so when we talk about needing a new IMS system, that would be at a higher match for that system. You don't get 50-50 for that. You could get 90-10 for that. We've talked a little bit about the idea of having this software called PulseLight, where we take the ER data, the admission codes, the admitting codes, the Medicaid admitting codes for our home and community-based waiver folks. We would be able to get those codes, put it through this software, and codes that come out that would indicate that this possibly could be a situation like abuse or neglect or a critical incident for our individuals. We can then match it up to the reports we're getting to make sure we're getting all the reports. This is the crux of the OIG report that we know is coming out in a I don't know, whenever, a couple of months, I guess. But that OIG report, this is how they looked at this data. They kind of ran it through and saying, these items, you need to see if you've got a report that matches them because they're indicative of abuse, neglect, or exploitation, not exploitation, abuse or neglect, or a critical incident. Something bad happened. You should have a report about that. We don't have access to that data normally, as far as his thousands upon thousands of codes of folks going to the doctor and to the ER. We need a system that'll help us pull out the ones we need to really look at and concentrate on. So that system would also be able to be at that 90-10 match rate. That's why we need an individual service agreement. Some of our other activities are other QA activities that can be gotten at a higher rate. I don't want to take a 50-50 match if we can get 70-30 or 75-30, 75-25. Okay, that's what that individual service agreement means. So we have to talk about some of those. We need to work on that one residential rate to get it up. I know we are not going to get a waiver amendment done to do individual residential rates right now. But we need to go ahead, and even to complete step 2 of our plan, we need to go ahead and get that residential rate bumped up based on cost. So I'm not making numbers up. And so Baker has the confidence what we're asking for, we do need to have. We need to talk about our ICF rate. That is another item that has to be, or we're going to find that providers are not going to want to do ICFs because the rate is too low. So we need to get in there and work on that. And then we need to, I want to have a good start to where we sit down with the MRSA folks and start building the residential rates going forward. I do, because I want to put those into the waiver documents as we rewrite the waivers or reapprove the waivers for the next 5 years. Those discrete rates need to be in there. That's got to be our #1 job right now. So that's kind of my top. I think that's about all I can get done in the next couple of weeks because I'm not the only one with a list to sit down with Director Baker to get that stuff done. The next item is one of those pre-announcements that we'll be bringing you information next week, so I want to give you a heads up on it. We've talked about this before, and that is the legacy bed vacancies. When we talk about revenue for providers, one of the biggest revenue you have is the number of residential beds you have. If you've got a 4-bedroom home and you have a vacancy in that home, that is a loss of revenue that is significant. You need to keep those beds filled. Well, we have this legacy bed thing. I actually never actually seen it written down, but we've got, and that's what I want to make sure we don't have it written down somewhere, that basically if you are a residential provider and you've been given a slot, unless that person moves and takes their money with them, your slot you get paid for 30 days. During COVID, you're getting paid 60 days. But you get to keep the vacancy forever. And we have some vacancies that are open over a year. So if you think about, I need to incentivize you filling your beds, because that way you stay healthy because your revenue stream continues. So that is one way to incentivize folks to fill their beds, because the vacancy would revert back to DDSN after a determined time, and we'll, give you a recommendation as to what that should be. And then you would basically say, okay, now I found somebody to go in that vacancy. Can I have one of those CTH2 bed slots? And we would give it out. This is not unprecedented. This is exactly how we run the SLP1 program. When someone vacates an SLP1 slot, their slot reverts to a pool. You've got somebody that fits that need of service. You say, hey, I got an SLP1 person, can I have a slot for that person? And they will, DDSN would give you that slot. So that would help us manage the beds still, but also incentivize folks to get their vacancies filled, and also give new providers a shot at having some beds come their way. Okay? We will conduct a January Step 2 information session, so folks understand what we're looking for in those packages, just to make sure for some of the, based on what I'm seeing in the swap packages coming in, I think we need to just have a little bit of an information session for them so people aren't going back and having to do things 2 or 3 times. They can get that a training session just like Chris did for his. We'll do it for the packets. I just also want to tell that we have a policy committee and we have a very ambitious schedule. But as we are going through this process, all these processes, we're going to find policies that are going to need to be kind of brought up to the forefront and said, just like when we're talking about the personal funds policy or the development of anything to do with the outlier situation, we can't proceed with another step until that policy is fixed. So occasionally we will have to pull a policy off the line and say, we need to work on this one because it interferes with where we're going. So we want to make sure our policies and our procedures are lining up. Just want to throw that out there. I want to thank all the regional center DSPs and the staff who have been working and will be working through the holidays. I also want to thank all the community DSPs and the staff who are doing the same. Working a 24-hour facility is always difficult during the holidays. Bad weather, including, it's never a good time. But now we have a pandemic laying on top of everything. So they're not only working through the holidays, they're working through the holidays with a pandemic. I want all of us who are not doing this to remember them. Thank them for what they're doing, because they are where the rubber meets the road. They're given the care, the hands-on. I want you all to know that you have my deepest appreciation. I want to thank the staff who are working diligently to make this transition to fee-for-service as smoothly and seamlessly as possible for the provider network. Again, we cannot care for our folks without a strong, vibrant provider network, and it's my goal to maintain the health of the network as well as our regional centers as we go through this. I would like to thank everyone and also wish everyone a happy holiday season, with prayers for a very happy and deep prayers for a healthy new year. And we have the State Fiscal Accountability Authority meeting today about the Witten Center property at 2 o'clock today.
Anything further? Yeah. Any
Part of that going to be, part of the 2 o'clock meeting going to be about moving the houses into?
No, we're just doing one project at a time. We want to get the Witten Center thing through, and then we'll come revisit the properties.
So is there a plan for that in
Yes.
2021? I mean, is there a month?
Yes, yeah. We're not taking it off the
March.
March meeting. It's just easier doing one step at a time. I think we've got a little bit of that going with the legislative committee. Instead of putting 9 items through, we're kind of lowering the bite. Yes, sir.
Going back to, we were talking about the matching, and we had talked earlier about tracking, case managers.
Okay.
Just look into that and see whether or not.
Yeah, I think it's gonna have to be, I think it's gonna be a change in how the standard, the manual,
Correct.
what is expected, yeah. I think we need to put it there.
Okay.
Because you want it to be mandatory, you don't want it to be a practice that they can do or not do. You want it to be, build it into the system, Robin. I'm thinking that's what you want it to be.
Yeah, one of the enhanced FMAP activities is Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, which I think might actually involve technology utilized for that as well. We'll have to explore that, but I think it's a 90-10 match or something on that activity, so that's certainly something we'll look into. And to your earlier question, there's 407 case managers.
Okay, and
It's not that.
only because I used to be involved with Time Warner Cable, and they had a very effective system. So we need to just get with our technical folks. And because to me, based upon what Mary just said, at 90, and we can get to that 90-10 on such, it would help us out tremendously. And then it would certainly help tremendously with fraud, because when I log in and then I have to give my analysis of my visit, it registered because I can go back and track it.
Then, we are going to, move on to, the executive session. It's my understanding we enter into executive session to discuss a contractual and employment matter. Would entertain a motion to do so at this time.
So moved.
You have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we will commence that executive session in 7 minutes, 20 after. Everybody can take a break. We rose out of executive session, that no votes were taken, no decisions were made, no motions were made, etc., as usual. Is there any other business to come before the public session?
Can be, Chairman, we've exhausted the agenda.
You have exhausted the agenda, so I would set the next meeting for January 21st and would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
You're good.